Right now, you may be lying in the stillness of your room, yet your thoughts are running a race against a clock that doesn't actually exist. Perhaps you feel a sharp, hollow pressure in your chest, the quiet ache of believing you have fallen behind in the rhythm of your own life. You check the time. You measure what you have accomplished against what you think you should have done by now, and you find yourself constantly calculating the distance between who you are and the person you thought you would become. It is a wearying way to exist, this perpetual act of standing on the edge of a dry field, holding a cup that remains empty while the sun continues to climb. You are not alone in this restlessness. The air in your room is cool. The shadows are stretching long and deep against the walls, and the distant hum of the world is fading into the soft background of the night. Feel the weight of your body sinking into the mattress. Allow the tension in your jaw to unravel, and notice how the fabric of your covers feels against your skin. You have arrived here at the end of a long day of striving, and for these next few hours, nothing is demanded of you. You do not need to prove your worth. You do not need to justify your pace. And you certainly do not need to measure your soul against a standard that was never meant for you. Maybe you came here because the silence of the night feels too loud when the internal ledger is still open. We are going to explore something different tonight. We are going to step away from the habit of dredging the dry riverbed of the past to find where the water stopped flowing. The mind often believes that if it just replayed every failure or every missed opportunity, it could finally force the stream to return. But the stream does not respond to our frustration, and the silt of yesterday cannot be cleared by the force of our own judgment. The paradox we are holding is this. You think that by staying awake and worrying about being late, you are somehow keeping your life on track. You believe that your anxiety is a guardrail, keeping you from drifting further off course. But the opposite is true. The more you grip the imaginary tiller of your history, the more you exhaust the very strength you need to inhabit the present. Peace is not found by running faster to catch up to a phantom version of your future. Peace begins the moment you stop trying to irrigate land that has already gone to seed, and instead, look at the water that is actually moving right here, in the quiet of this moment. You are not broken because you feel lost. You are not failing because the irrigation of your life feels clogged or slow. What you are feeling is simply the friction of a heart that cares deeply, but has forgotten how to trust the season. Tonight, we will not force your mind to go blank, and we will not ask you to banish your worries. We will simply learn how to set down the heavy measuring cup you have been carrying. We will look at the way your mind seeks to control the flow, and we will gently invite it to notice the water that is already present. Consider how often you have stood over the terraces of your own life, staring at the dry, cracked earth. You have spent countless nights trying to calculate exactly when the flow stopped, and why, and what you could have done to keep the channel open. You blame yourself for the silt. You criticize your own hands for not being stronger, and you treat every dry patch as a personal indictment of your character. But the terraces are not you. The dry earth is not your identity. The river is not something you create. It is something you allow. If it feels right, take a slow, deep breath. Let it fill the spaces that have felt tight and constricted. As you exhale, imagine the air leaving your body like a soft breeze passing through high mountain grass. You do not need to solve the geography of your history tonight. The mountain will remain tomorrow, and the channels will still be there. But for tonight, you can grant yourself the grace of silence. You can give your spirit permission to stop digging. There is a quiet, steady wisdom in admitting that we are tired of measuring. We have been conditioned to believe that life is a series of quotas, a debt to be paid in hours and efforts. We check the internal clock. We glance at the calendar of our years, and we feel a thrum of panic that the harvest is not as abundant as it should be. But nature does not check the clock. The water does not ask for permission to flow. It moves according to the landscape. It moves according to the rain, and it moves according to its own deep, ancient rhythm. Your life is no different. You are not a machine of production, and you are not a record keeper for your own perceived shortcomings. Right now, in this dim light, nothing is required of you. You are safe enough to soften. You are safe enough to let the ledger close, even if your mind wants to reach for the numbers. even if it wants to pull up the old logs and reread the accounts of where you think you went wrong. You can simply notice that urge. You can say to your mind, I see that you are worried, but we are not going to count the costs tonight. We are going to listen to the sound of the night instead. Maybe you have felt this way for a long time, this feeling of walking through a field that refuses to bloom. You have done the work, you have labored under the sun, and still you feel like you are standing in the dust. That feeling is not a verdict. It is just an invitation to look at the gate. We spend our energy trying to fix the soil, when perhaps the only thing that needs to happen is to clear the channel that brings the water. And the channel, dear friend, is not found in the past. It is found right here, in the way you allow your shoulders to drop, in the way you let your hands rest open, and in the way you allow yourself to finally, truly stop. As we prepare to walk together through this landscape, do not worry if your mind wanders. Do not judge yourself if the thoughts return to the tasks of tomorrow or the regrets of yesterday. That is just the mind doing what it was taught to do. It is trying to be helpful in its own clumsy, restless way. You don't have to agree with it. You don't have to obey it. You can just let it be, like a bird flying over a mountain. You can simply notice the bird and then return your attention to the feeling of your body resting against the surface beneath you. Everything you are seeking is already here, buried beneath the layers of your own struggle. It isn't something you need to go out and fetch. It isn't something you need to buy or achieve or earn through your endurance. It is simply the quality of presence that exists when you stop fighting the reality of where you are. You are already in the garden. You are already standing by the water. You only need to notice the sluice gate. Stay with me now. Feel the slow, rhythmic beating of your heart. It has been beating your entire life, carrying you through every season, every drought and every flood. It does not calculate. It does not measure. It does not ask if it has done enough. It simply sustains you. That rhythm is your true north. Tonight we will follow that rhythm deeper into the silence. We will let the stories fall away, and we will find the quiet, steady truth that remains when the measuring stops. You are exactly where you need to be to begin this clearing. You are safe, you are held, and you are ready to rest. High on the spine of a mountain that seemed to touch the underside of the clouds, there existed a series of stone terraces carved directly into the bedrock. In this place, the air was thin and tasted of cold minerals, and the wind had a way of whispering secrets against the jagged rock faces. A farmer named Jiro lived here, a man whose life was measured not by the passage of hours, but by the movement of water. His sole responsibility was to manage the irrigation of these terraces, ensuring that the snowmelt from the peaks flowed steadily down through a complex system of stone channels. Each terrace was a shallow pool, reflecting the sky, intended to nurture the crop that supported his small village far below. Jiro was a man of intense focus and even more intense worry. For as long as he could remember, he had felt as though he were standing on a treadmill that was moving just a little faster than his own tired feet. Every morning, he would rise while the stars were still bright, convinced that he had already missed the optimal moment to open the sluice gates. He moved through his chores with a rigid, desperate efficiency, constantly checking the moisture in the soil, constantly gauging the height of the water against the edges of the stone walls, and constantly feeling that the entire harvest would fail if he did not intervene in every single drop of flow. One season, a dry wind persisted longer than the elders could recall. The melt from the peaks turned into a mere trickle. Jiro became obsessed with the decline. He would spend his evenings walking the perimeter of the terraces, his lantern swinging in wide, frantic arcs, his eyes searching for leaks in the stone, for obstructions, or for any sign that the water was being wasted. He felt the dry patches of earth as personal failures. He walked with a heavy gait, his shoulders hunched as if he were trying to push the mountain itself to move faster. He was a man who felt he was constantly behind, constantly chasing a ghost of a harvest that had already vanished, and he lived with a persistent, gnawing sense that he was not enough to save the world he had been assigned. An elderly monk named Haruto lived in a small windowless hut at the very top of the ridge, near the source of the spring. Haruto was rarely seen, and he never offered advice unless he was asked a direct question. One afternoon, after another day of punishing fruitless labor, Jiro stumbled up the final path to the monk's hut. His hands were raw from scraping away sediment, and his bamboo measuring cup, which he used to gauge the depth of the water, was gripped so tightly that his knuckles were white. Jiro found the old man sitting in the dirt outside his threshold, idly turning a rusted iron sluice gate over in his hands. It was a heavy, discarded piece of hardware, once used to divert the flow of the spring, now oxidized and thick with layers of old, dried clay. Jiro fell to his knees, his breath ragged. He gestured wildly toward the terraces below, which were parched and brittle. He complained that he had tried everything. He said he had dredged the channels. He had blocked the side drains to conserve every ounce of moisture, and he had even slept by the gates to ensure no evaporation took place. He said that despite all this, he was failing, and the mountain was turning against him. He asked why the water was so stingy. He asked why he had been left behind by the cycle of the seasons, as if he were being punished for some forgotten lack of vigilance. Haruto did not look up immediately. He continued to turn the rusted iron gate in his hands, feeling the weight of the metal, the rough, uneven surface of the rust, and the cool, unyielding reality of the iron. He held the object out to Jiro. He asked the farmer to take it. Jiro, confused and desperate for a solution, reached out and grabbed the iron. It was heavy, far heavier than he expected, and he felt his arm dip under its weight. The rust flaked off onto his palm, leaving a dark, earthy stain. The monk asked Jiro to hold the gate at arm's length. Jiro obeyed, though his muscles burned with the effort of the day. The monk then asked him a single, quiet question. He asked Jiro how long he had been carrying the anxiety of the mountain in his own muscles, rather than letting the mountain carry its own weight. Jiro did not understand. He stammered that the water had to be managed, that without his intervention, the terraces would crumble. Haruto smiled, a small, weary expression that did not mock the farmer but seemed to hold the space for his exhaustion. The monk then gestured for Jiro to set the rusted iron gate down on the bare, dry ground between them. Jiro set it down with a dull, echoing thud. The sound seemed to linger in the thin air, vibrating against the stone floor of the ridge. Haruto then stood up, his joints creaking, and walked over to the spring that bubbled up from the rock nearby. He did not use a cup or a gate. He simply sat down beside the small pool of water and watched it. He beckoned Jiro to join him. When Jiro sat, the monk did not point to the water. He pointed to the way the water moved around a small embedded stone in the center of the spring. The water did not struggle against the stone. It did not try to reroute itself through sheer force of will. It simply flowed over and around, moving effortlessly, responding to the shape of the landscape without needing to understand why the landscape was shaped that way. The monk said that Jiro was like a man trying to irrigate a field with a handful of sand. He said that the fear of being behind was a wall he had built with his own hands, block by block, hour by hour. He noted that when the heart is convinced it is falling behind, it creates a second, internal drought, more severe than any lack of rain. Jiro looked at his own hands, stained with the rust of the iron gate, and felt the tremors of his own fatigue. He had been trying to force the mountain to yield, thinking that his frustration was a form of devotion, when it was actually a form of interference. The farmer sat in the silence for a long time. He did not hear a grand revelation. He did not see the sky open up to pour rain upon his crops. He simply felt the weight of his own shoulders finally letting go. The rusted iron gate remained on the ground, a useless, heavy, and unnecessary burden that had occupied his mind far more than it had ever served his fields. He realized, with a sudden, sharp clarity that made his heart ache, that he had been spending more time tending to his own worry than he had been tending to the reality of the flow. He was tired, not just the tired of a body that has worked too hard, but the tired of a soul that has been fighting the rhythm of its own existence. There was no magical instruction to be found here. There was only the sight of the water moving around the stone, the feeling of the dry mountain air against his face, and the awareness of the iron gate lying abandoned in the dust. The monk turned back to his hut, leaving Jiro with the realization that he was still the keeper of the terraces. But he was no longer the master of the rain. The lesson was not in how to fix the drought. It was in how to stop adding the heavy, rusted metal of his own judgment to the natural movement of the day. Jiro did not know what he would do when he returned to his terraces the next morning. He only knew that for the first time in years, he did not want to pick up the heavy iron gate again. As he sat there, the sun began to dip behind the peaks, casting long, bruised shadows across the stone carvings. The world seemed to hold its breath. Jiro watched the light change, and for once he did not calculate how many hours of daylight he had lost. He simply watched the light. He was behind in his work, yes, but he was not behind in his life. He was exactly where the mountain had placed him. And for now, that was enough. He began to notice that the silence on the ridge was not empty, but filled with the sound of the very water he had been so busy managing, flowing quietly through the rock, doing its own work without needing his constant, frantic supervision. This story is not telling us that the farmer should have been indifferent to his crop. It is not suggesting that a life without care is the goal, or that we should simply walk away from our responsibilities with a shrug. The monk did not tell Jiro to abandon the terraces, or to stop tending to the water. What was being revealed was something far more subtle, and perhaps far more difficult to practice. The suffering that Jiro carried was not born merely from the drought, or from the reality of the thin mountain water. It was born from the way he had turned his own life into a permanent emergency, an ongoing, frantic effort to keep a crumbling system together through the sheer force of his own anxiety. We often believe that our struggle is the thing keeping our world from falling apart. We imagine that if we were to stop the inner panic, if we were to set down the heavy iron gates of our worry, everything we love would instantly wither. This is the great misunderstanding of the heart. We assume that because we feel deeply, we must also suffer deeply, as if the pain were the currency we use to pay for our devotion. But the truth is that the worry does not nourish the field. The anxiety does not increase the flow of the spring. The panic only serves to consume the one who is holding it, leaving the farmer with less strength to see the path that the water is actually taking. When the mind adds judgment to the difficulty of life, it creates a second, much heavier layer of pain. The first pain is the reality of the situation, the dry patch of earth, the loss, the mistake, or the moment of uncertainty. These are the natural shadows of human experience, but the second pain is the story we write about that reality. It is the voice that says we are failing because we are struggling. It is the narrative that claims we have fallen behind because we have not met a timeline that exists only in our own heads. This second layer of suffering is entirely optional, yet it is the one we spend the most time cultivating. It is the silt that we drag into our channels, expecting that if we just push it around enough, the water will finally be satisfied. Notice how the mind tries to turn your life into a series of managed obstacles. You see a dry terrace and immediately label yourself as someone who is not capable, someone who is not diligent enough, or someone who is inherently behind. You take a natural fluctuation in the rhythm of your existence and sharpen it into a weapon you use against your own worth. The monk Haruto was pointing toward a different way of relating to the drought. He was showing that you can be present for the difficulty without becoming the difficulty. You can notice the lack of water without needing to define yourself as a failure. You can stand on the mountain, witnessing the dry earth, and still keep your own center of gravity grounded in something other than your fear of the future. This is what it means to be truly awake to the movement of the present. It means recognizing that the water is not yours to command, only yours to witness. When you try to control the outcome with your fear, you are like Jiro gripping that rusted iron gate, carrying it through every room you enter, believing that the weight of the metal proves how much you care. But the weight does not help the spring. It only keeps you from seeing that the spring is moving in its own way, perhaps differently than you expected, but still according to its own nature. You can care for your life, you can work hard, you can strive for beauty and sustenance, all without the desperate, tightening fist that claims the world must look exactly the way you planned it to look. The teaching here is about reclaiming your energy. Think of how much power you lose when you try to fight the weather of your own life. Think of how much light you lose when you treat every setback as a signal that you are being left behind. When you stop adding the layer of judgment, you are not becoming cold or detached. You're becoming responsive. You are becoming a vessel that can actually hold the present moment, rather than one that is constantly spilling its contents in a rush to get somewhere else. The farmer's peace did not come from a miracle of rain, but from the sudden, quiet understanding that his own interference was the biggest obstruction in his garden. You might wonder if it is truly possible to live without that constant, low-level hum of anxiety about whether you are doing enough. It is, but it requires a change of posture. It requires that you stop treating your thoughts as a master and start treating them as guests. A thought says, "I am behind," and instead of taking it as a fact, you can treat it as a weather pattern. You can notice it, you can acknowledge that it has arrived, and you can let it continue its journey across the sky of your awareness, without needing to build your house inside the storm. The thought does not define the truth of your worth. It is just a thought, passing through the hall, much like a shadow across the mountain terrace. When we let go, we are not losing ourselves. We are finding the part of ourselves that was always there, underneath the labor and the worry. It is the part of you that knows how to simply exist, regardless of the harvest. It is the part of you that remains calm, even when the channels are dry, because it knows that the drought is also a part of the landscape. You are not the terraces. You are not the silt. You are not the rusted iron gate. You are the space that holds it all. You are the awareness that can watch the seasons turn, even when the turning is painful. This wisdom is meant to bring you closer to yourself, not to push you away into a state of hollow, uncaring peace. It is about becoming so sturdy in your own presence that you do not need the world to stay still in order for you to be okay. You are allowed to be tired. You are allowed to be unfinished. You are allowed to be in a season of drought, knowing that your value is not determined by the amount of water currently moving through your hands. The water will come, and the water will go, but the mountain will remain. And you are the mountain, standing steady in the center of your own experience. As you listen to these words, feel the permission to release the grip of your own expectations. You have been carrying the weight of the mountain for a long time, trying to keep every detail in perfect alignment, but you were never meant to carry it alone. You were meant to be the witness to it. You were meant to participate in the flow, not to force it. When you feel the panic rising, or the urge to reach for the rusted gate of worry, just come back to this simple grounding thought. I am here. The moment is here, and I do not need to solve the drought to be worthy of the rest. There is an incredible softness that enters a room when we stop insisting that life must conform to our panic. Your mind is like that mountain spring, prone to clouding when the ground is stirred, but inherently clear if it is given the chance to settle. We are simply giving the sediment a chance to sink. We are letting the waters become quiet. We are learning that the answer to your exhaustion is not found in the next item on your list, or in a better version of your past, but in the ability to sit quietly with whatever is happening right now, without needing to change it, without needing to judge it, and without needing to defend it. The monk left Jiro sitting on the ridge, not because he was finished, but because there was nothing more to say. Wisdom is often found in the silence that remains, after the struggle has been set down. The iron was heavy, but the hands that held it were already beginning to heal. You are in that moment of setting down the iron. You are in the silence after the labor, and that is enough for tonight. You do not need to know the next step. You do not need to understand the entire map of your life. You only need to breathe, to be present, and to let the weight fall away. There is a deep, ancient intelligence in your own body that knows how to rest, and it is waiting for you to stop pushing, so it can finally take the lead. You are coming home, back to the simple, quiet, and unmeasured truth of your own life. Now let us bring this teaching into the quiet of your own body. We are going to practice the art of setting down the heavy, rusted iron gates of your own concern. You do not need to change your posture, and you do not need to alter your breathing. Just allow yourself to be exactly where you are, supported by the earth, held by the gentle space of the night. Close your eyes if it feels right. If you prefer to leave them open, let your gaze soften, resting on nothing in particular. Take a slow, steady breath, and as you do, feel your lungs fill with the cool, quiet air of the evening. When you exhale, imagine the air carrying away the unnecessary tension in your shoulders, the tightness in your chest, and the restless energy in your hands. You are not trying to push these things out of your life. You are simply giving them permission to exist without being held so tightly. Think for a moment of that measuring cup, the one you have been using to gauge your progress, your worth, and your distance from where you think you should be. See it clearly in your mind. Notice how your fingers have been curled around it, how your muscles have been tensed in anticipation of finding it empty. You have been carrying this cup through the fields of your day, measuring every shadow and every patch of dry ground, always looking for the shortage. If it feels right, imagine taking that cup from your hand and setting it down on the ground beside you. You do not have to throw it away. You do not have to distrust it. Just place it on the earth where it can rest. Feel the immediate, subtle change in the muscles of your hand, the way your palm opens when it is no longer tasked with holding that weight. There is a profound, quiet relief in that small action. Now, look at the dry patch of earth in your mind. This is the place where you have felt behind, the place where you have felt that the water is not reaching, the place that causes you the most internal drought. Do not try to flood it with logic or force it to bloom with effort. Just sit with it. Acknowledge it as if you were a traveler coming upon a quiet, forgotten corner of a garden. It is just a part of the landscape. It is not an error. It is not a sign of your failure. It is simply a patch of ground that is waiting for the cycle of the season. If a thought arises now, a thought that says you are being lazy, or that you are forgetting something vital, or that you are wasting your time by resting, do not fight it. You do not need to engage in a debate with that voice. Just notice it. Label it as a thought, much like a distant bird passing over the mountain. You see the bird, you acknowledge its presence, and you watch it continue its flight. You do not try to catch it. You do not try to bring it down to earth. You simply let it be. Feel the rhythm of your own heart once more. It is a steady, subterranean pulse that operates entirely without your intervention. It does not wait for you to approve of its beat, and it does not rush because you are worried about the hour. It is a part of the mountain's own internal architecture. Connect with that rhythm. Use it as your anchor in this moment. Every time the mind tries to reach for the rusted iron gate of your past, or the measuring cup of your future, simply return to the feeling of your heartbeat, safe and rhythmic, here in the dark. There is no need to make this practice perfect. You do not have to have a quiet mind to be in the right place. Even if your mind is chaotic, even if it is swirling with lists and regrets, you are still in the right place. Because the place you are in is not a state of mind. It is the state of your own existence. It is the reality of your body breathing, of your heart beating, and of the night air moving through the room. That is the only field you truly need to tend tonight. If you notice yourself becoming tense, or if you find yourself clenching your jaw as you try to get this right, just smile at yourself. This is the work, after all. The work is not the final, peaceful result. The work is the gentle, repeated act of letting go of the tension when you notice it has returned. It is the kindness you show to yourself when you find that you have been gripping the iron gate once again. You just set it down. You don't have to scold yourself. You just set it down, and you return to your breath. Let the image of the terrace pools come to your mind again. Imagine them filled with the calm, reflective water of the night. There is no wind to stir the surface. The water is perfectly still, reflecting the vast, dark sky above. This is the quality of your own mind when it stops trying to stir the silt. It is naturally capable of mirroring the world without needing to possess it, without needing to change it, and without needing to understand it. You are doing enough by simply being here. You are participating in the flow of the night simply by allowing your body to soften and your mind to loosen its hold. The drought will shift, the seasons will turn, and the landscape of your life will change in ways you cannot yet see. But none of that requires your panic. None of that requires your judgment. You can trust the mountain, and you can trust the water, and you can trust your own heart to find its way through the valley. Stay in this space of allowing for a few more moments. Let your attention rest on the sensation of your own warmth. Feel your feet, your legs, your stomach, and your chest. Each part of you is already doing the work of being alive. You do not need to monitor them. You do not need to check their progress. You are already in the center of the garden, and the garden is taking care of itself. If you feel yourself drifting toward the edge of sleep, that is perfectly fine. You do not need to stay awake to get the benefit of this. The wisdom is settling into your bones, deeper than your thoughts could ever reach. If the mind tries to demand a summary, if it tries to ask what you have achieved by sitting here, just gently close that ledger. You haven't achieved anything, and that is the success. You have simply taken the time to stop digging. You have simply taken the time to stand still by the water and to watch the light. That is more than enough for tonight. That is the very foundation of the peace you have been seeking. You are safe here, in the quiet, in the dark, and in the steady pulse of your own breathing. Nothing else is required of you until the sun rises, and even then, you will be free to meet it, not as a laborer, but as a witness. Years later, when the seasons had cycled through many patterns of rain and drought, Jiro had grown old. His hands were gnarled like the roots of the ancient pines that clung to the higher cliffs. He was no longer the man who obsessed over the sluice gates, but he had found a new, more subtle way of trapping himself in the past. He had become a master of the terraces, and because he was so skilled, he felt a crushing, silent duty to ensure that no drop of water was ever lost to a leak or an oversight. He took pride in his precision, but this pride had become a new, invisible cage. He believed that if he maintained the terraces perfectly, he could somehow redeem the years of his own struggle. One summer, a violent, unseasonable storm broke over the mountain. The sky turned the color of bruised slate, and for 2 days the rain lashed the terraces with a ferocity that threatened to tear the stone walls from the hillside. Jiro spent those nights in his small shelter, pacing, his heart pounding in sync with the thunder. He felt the familiar pull of the old anxiety, the terrifying thought that the mountain was going to undo everything he had painstakingly built. He wanted to run out into the storm, to patch the embankments, to force the water to go where it belonged. But he was old now, and the mountain paths were slick and treacherous. He was forced to sit in the dark, watching the water cascade uncontrollably over the edges of the pools. In the height of the gale, a young novice from the valley below, a girl named Kimi, sought refuge in Jiro's hut. She had been caught on the trail, her robes soaked through, her eyes wide with a fear that Jiro recognized instantly as his own former self. She was trembling, not just from the cold, but from the sight of the chaos outside. She looked at Jiro and asked how he could sit so calmly when the mountain was destroying their work. She watched the water overflow the terraces and asked why he didn't do something to stop it. She was convinced that if they did not act, the entire hillside would be washed away by morning. Jiro looked at the girl, then at the small, sturdy clay jar of tea sitting by his hearth. He did not answer her directly. Instead, he reached for a small, shallow wooden dipper. He handed it to her. He told her that if she wanted to stop the mountain, she was welcome to try, but that he was going to make some tea. Kimi took the dipper, bewildered. She stood at the doorway, looking at the raging torrents outside, and then at the tiny wooden tool in her hand. The absurdity of it hit her. She realized she couldn't possibly bail out a mountain storm with a cup. She turned back to Jiro. He was watching the steam rise from the pot. He didn't look defeated. He looked observant. He told her that he used to believe that his hands were the only thing holding the world together. He told her that he used to think the storm was a personal betrayal. Kimi sat down slowly, the dipper resting on her lap. She admitted that she was terrified of what the morning would reveal. She said she was afraid that if the terraces were broken, she would have to admit that all her hard work had been for nothing. She was afraid that her identity, her very reason for being a keeper of the terraces, depended on the perfection of the walls. Jiro nodded. He said that he had spent decades trying to build a version of the mountain that couldn't be touched by change. He said he had worked with the iron gate of his own expectations, believing that if he just reinforced it enough, the reality of the mountain would finally bend to his will. But the storm was not a judgment, and the overflowing water was not a failure of his character. He pointed to the way the water was carving new channels into the earth, paths he had never seen before. He said that even when the old ways were washed away, the mountain was still here. Kimi looked at the overflow, and for the first time she saw it not as a disaster, but she saw that the earth beneath was not being destroyed, but reshaped. It was a terrifying process, but it was not an end. The fear began to drain from her shoulders, replaced by a strange hollowed-out stillness. She set the wooden dipper aside. She didn't throw it away, and she didn't cling to it. She simply set it down. She realized that her need to control the storm was the only thing preventing her from surviving the night with any shred of peace. That night, they drank their tea while the mountain groaned and shifted. They didn't talk about the terraces. They talked about the way the wind sounded in the pines, and the taste of the warm, smoky tea, and the feeling of being small in the face of something much larger than their own intentions. When Kimmy's mind would drift to the damage being done to the crops, she would catch herself, take a breath, and come back to the warmth of the hearth. She wasn't ignoring the reality of the situation. She was refusing to add the second layer of suffering, the layer of self-blame and frantic internal reconstruction. She realized that her panic had always been an attempt to prove to herself that she was valuable. If she could save the terrace, she was a good person. If the terrace fell, she was a failure. Now in the dark, with the rain still hammering against the stone, she saw the lie in that equation. Her value wasn't something to be earned by a stone wall or a harvest. It was something she already possessed, as surely as the mountain possessed the rain. The storm didn't define her, and the damage didn't make her less than she was. Jiro watched her. He saw the tension leave her face. He saw her eyes soften, shifting from the frantic search for a solution to the quiet acceptance of the moment. He knew he didn't need to teach her anything else. The storm was doing the work for him. The storm was teaching her that the world is impermanent, and that there is a deep, abiding safety in admitting you cannot hold everything together. He leaned back, resting his head against the cool stone wall. He didn't feel the need to be the hero or the master, or the one who knew the secret to the perfect harvest. He was just an old man, sitting in a hut, watching the light flicker, and for the first time in his life, he didn't feel behind. He was right here the next morning. The storm broke as suddenly as it had begun. The mountain was silent, draped in the heavy, saturated air of the aftermath. Kimi went out. First she walked the terraces, her boots sinking into the wet earth. Jiro stayed in the hut for a while, listening to the drip of water from the eaves. He felt a gentle, quiet curiosity about what he would find. He didn't feel the dread he used to feel. He walked out slowly, his legs stiff, and stood beside Kimi on the bank of the highest terrace. The damage was real. The stone walls had indeed collapsed in several places, and the soil had shifted, burying some of the young crops under thick layers of silt. Kimi looked at the devastation, and her heart sank, but she did not reach for the panicky urge to fix it all in an instant. She stood there, breathing, observing the landscape. She noticed that where the wall had broken, the water was now flowing in a new, natural path toward the lower fields, a path that was actually more efficient than the one they had carefully built. She saw that the silt wasn't just waste. It was fresh, nutrient-rich soil being spread across the slopes. She turned to Jiro. She didn't say that it was okay, or that they would rebuild it exactly as it was. She simply asked him what they should start with. First, there was no complaint in her voice. There was no accusation against the storm. There was only the pragmatic, quiet focus of someone who has stopped fighting the landscape and started working with it. Jiro felt a surge of warmth in his chest. He saw that she had not lost her spirit, but she had lost her burden. She was no longer trying to control the uncontrollable. She was simply showing up to do what could be done, one step at a time. They spent the day in a rhythm that felt entirely different from Jiro's old, driven way of working. They didn't rush. They didn't grumble about the lost time or the setback. They simply cleared the debris where they could and allowed the mountain to settle where they couldn't. When they became tired, they stopped and sat on the rocks, watching the hawks circle in the clear, washed sky. When Kimi felt the urge to worry about the winter harvest, she would look at the way the sunlight hit the wet stones, and she would bring her attention back to the task at hand. They were not rebuilding a monument to their own control. They were simply tending to what was in front of them. The terraces would be different now. The crop would be smaller this year. But the mountain remained, and the water was still flowing, and they were still alive to see the way the light danced on the surface of the pools. Jiro realized that the perfection he had craved was a dead thing. This new, messy, altered landscape was alive. It was moving. It was real. The transformation was not in the success of the harvest. It was in the change in their own hearts. They had been cracked open by the storm, yes, but that was how the light got in. They stopped seeing the mountain as a rival to be conquered or a master to be pleased. They saw it as their home. And in that shift, the feeling of being behind, of being inadequate, of being at the mercy of every fluctuating event simply dissolved. They were no longer runners in a race. They were just people on a mountain, doing the work that the day required, and finding that it was enough to be exactly where they were. This is the deeper teaching of the terraces. The storms of your life, the losses, the sudden shifts, the moments where your plans are dismantled by forces you cannot see, are not there to destroy you. They are there to show you how much of your identity you have tied to things that can be swept away. When you stop fighting the storm, you don't lose yourself. You find yourself. You find the part of you that survives the wreckage, the part that is not measured by the height of your walls or the abundance of your crops. You find the part that knows how to sit by the hearth, how to drink the tea, and how to begin again, without needing the world to be anything other than what it is. You have been running from your own storms for a long time, dear friend. You have been building barriers, trying to keep the rain out, trying to keep the path straight, and it is exhausting. It is the most exhausting thing a human being can do. But tonight, in the quiet of your room, you can let the storm be what it is. You don't need to rebuild everything tonight. You don't need to have the perfect answer for the damage. You don't need to be anything other than a person, sitting in the dark, watching the light flicker. The mountain is still there. The water is still flowing. And you are still here. And that is all that is required for the journey to continue. The mechanism that keeps you trapped in the feeling of being behind is not your lack of ability, but the intensity of your internal monitoring. Think of your mind as an irrigation channel that has been tasked with an impossible job. It believes it must watch every trickle, predict every shift in the mountain's climate, and account for every grain of silt before it even settles. This constant vigilance is meant to provide safety, but it only creates a state of perpetual, low-grade exhaustion. When you treat your internal life as a machine that must be perfectly calibrated, you begin to view any change in your rhythm, any moment of rest, any period of slower progress, any setback, as a system failure. This is the cycle of the second wound. The first wound is the objective reality of the mountain, the drought, the storm, the natural limitations of the soil. These are the aspects of your life that you cannot fully control. They are the weather of your existence. The second wound, however, is the story you construct around that weather. It is the voice that insists you are a failure because the sun is hot, or that you are incompetent because the rain washed away a wall. You take the raw, neutral facts of your life and you coat them in a layer of self-judgment. You turn the natural ebb and flow into a tally sheet where you are always in debt. When the mind clings to control, it is essentially trying to dam the entire river with a handful of earth. It assumes that if it can just hold the water back long enough, it can store up enough power to guarantee a perfect harvest. But water, by its very nature, is not meant to be held in a stagnant pool. It is meant to move. When you resist the movement of your life, when you resist the seasons of inactivity, the moments of feeling lost, or the times when you have to start over, you are creating a dam within your own spirit. The pressure builds, not from the external situation, but from your own stubborn refusal to let the water flow naturally. Consider the role of fear in this process. You are afraid that if you stop measuring your progress, you will simply cease to move forward. You think that your anxiety is the motor that keeps your life running. But fear is a brittle fuel. It may propel you forward for a time, but it does so by burning through your capacity for presence. You end up arriving at the harvest with a surplus of grain, but with a heart so parched and depleted that you cannot even taste the fruit of your labor. You have built a fortress of security, yet you have forgotten how to live inside it. This fear of uncertainty is the root of the need for approval. We want the world to provide us with constant confirmation that we are doing enough, because we have lost the ability to confirm it for ourselves. We look at the terraces of our peers, we compare the moisture of their soil to our own, and we feel a thrum of panic that we are missing out. We take our internal worth and tie it to the fluctuating conditions of the landscape. If the terraces are full, we are worthy. If they are dry, we are failing. By delegating our self-esteem to the weather, we have guaranteed that we will never know a moment of true, unshakable peace. To break this pattern, you do not need to become a different person. You do not need to achieve a state of emotional detachment where nothing hurts. The wisdom of the mountain teaches that the mountain itself experiences the drought. It feels the heat. It bears the scars of the storm. But it does not attempt to be anything other than a mountain. It does not try to be a forest when the rain is scarce, and it does not try to be a glacier when the sun is high. It simply exists within its own nature. You can do the same. You can meet your life, the losses, the delays, the times when you feel like you are standing in the dust, without trying to edit the reality of what is happening. When the urge to fix yourself through shame arises, notice the physical sensation of it. It often feels like a tightening, a contraction, a sudden urge to turn away from the present and leap into a future where everything is solved. That contraction is the moment the silt begins to block the channel. It is the moment you stop being the witness to your life and start being the judge of it. Instead of following that urge, try a different movement. Breathe into the contraction. Allow the sensation to be there without trying to push it away. You can say to yourself, I feel the urge to judge, but I am not the judge, I am the mountain. The Buddhist insight is not that you should stop working, or that you should stop striving for beauty and sustenance in your life. It is that you should stop conflating your effort with your identity. You can plant the seeds, you can tend the soil, and you can mend the walls, all while remaining perfectly unattached to the outcome. When the storm comes, you do not need to be the hero who prevents it. You can be the person who holds the space while it happens, and who cleans up when it is done. That is a form of discipline that is far more durable than the frantic, anxious effort of the past. It is the discipline of the river. You have spent so many years rehearsing the future, trying to anticipate every possible drought, that you have missed the taste of the water in the present moment. You have replayed your past failures, hoping that if you analyze them long enough, you can find a secret formula to ensure they never happen again. But the past is a dry riverbed. You can walk it. You can study the stones, but you will never find water there. The only place the water is flowing is here right now, in the physical sensation of your breath, in the quiet gravity of your body, and in the way the night air moves across your skin. This is the great, gentle secret of awakening. You are already in the center of the garden. You have been walking in circles, looking for the gate, while standing right in the middle of the terrace. The reason you have felt lost is because you were looking for a version of yourself that could finally, permanently satisfy the need for perfection. But that version does not exist, and it was never meant to exist. The version of you that is here, the one who is tired, the one who is uncertain, the one who is sometimes overwhelmed, that is the only you there is, and that you is enough. You can stop the habit of treating every thought as a command from a higher authority. Your thoughts are not the reality of your life. They are the weather reports that your mind generates based on past patterns. When a thought says, I am behind, it is just a report. It is not an objective truth. You do not have to believe it, and you certainly do not have to act on it as if it were a law. You can thank the mind for its vigilance, and then you can choose to return your focus to something more substantial. Return to the feeling of the earth beneath you. Return to the rhythm of your own steady heart. Notice how much of your daily life is spent in a state of subtle, background rebellion against what is currently happening. You are waiting for the light to change, waiting for the conversation to end, waiting for the project to be finished, waiting for the next phase of life to arrive. You are always living in the next terrace, never in the one where your feet are actually planted. This constant forward leaning is what creates the sense of being behind. You are already running to the future, so of course you feel like you haven't arrived. The shift is small, but it is profound. Stop trying to move ahead of yourself. Stop trying to outrun your own experience. When you find yourself in a state of discomfort, instead of leaning into the next moment to escape it, lean back into the current moment to occupy it. Feel the weight of your body. Feel the temperature of the air. Feel the texture of the surface beneath you. The discomfort is still there, but it is no longer the entire story. The story is now being told by your presence, not by your resistance. There is a stillness in the mountain that is not destroyed by the wind. There is a depth in the ocean that is not affected by the waves on the surface. That same stillness and that same depth exist within you. You do not need to go out and acquire it. You do not need to prove you have earned it. It is the inherent nature of your being, obscured only by the debris of your own constant motion. Tonight, we are just clearing the path. We are letting the debris settle so that the light can finally reach the floor of the valley. You are doing this by simply listening. You are doing this by allowing yourself to be still. You have arrived at the end of the day, and you have set down the heavy iron gates of your own concern. You are breathing, you are present, and you are open to the reality of the night. That is the only practice that matters. Everything else will follow, in its own time, in its own season, and in its own unmeasured way. You are safe now, you are held, and you can finally truly release the need to know what happens next. This practice does not live only on a mountain ridge. It does not exist only in the quiet of a midnight room. It is meant for the very moments when your life feels the most fragmented, when you are standing in the middle of a crowded day, feeling the pull of 100 different directions. Think of the times when you are waiting for a signal from someone else, your thumb hovering over a screen, your heart racing with the fear that the answer is not coming, or that it will be something you cannot handle. In that moment, you are holding the iron gate of your own anxiety. You are convinced that if you do not stay hypervigilant, if you do not keep the gate pressed firmly shut, the lack of communication will destroy your sense of security. But notice how you can breathe into that urgency. Before you reach out to check the screen again, pause. Feel your feet on the ground. Acknowledge that the feeling of being abandoned or forgotten is not the objective truth of your existence. It is just the weather of the moment. You can let the phone sit there, cold and silent, without needing to fill the space with your own panic. You are not losing your connection to others by choosing to stay connected to your own center. You are simply choosing not to add the heavy rusted metal of your fear to the naturally shifting tides of a conversation. Consider those nights when you lie awake, the room dark, the silence pressing in, while your mind begins to replay a mistake you made weeks ago. You are back in that conversation, back in that room, trying to edit your words, trying to force the situation to resolve into something that feels cleaner. You are digging in the dry riverbed, looking for the water that has already passed. It is an exhausting task, and the more you do it, the more your heart aches with the shame of having been less than perfect. But you are not that mistake. You are the space that holds the memory of the mistake. The next time the mind pulls you into that replayed scene, notice that you are not there, you are here. You are in your bed, you are safe. You can acknowledge the memory. You can even feel the sting of the regret. But you do not need to build your house inside it. You can let the memory pass through your awareness like a cloud passing over the mountain, and then return your attention to the feeling of your weight against the mattress. You are forgiving yourself not by forgetting the past, but by refusing to make the past the definition of your present worth. When you look at your life and see the empty spaces, the things you haven't achieved yet, the goals you haven't reached, the versions of yourself that haven't emerged, the mind often labels this as failing. It whispers that you are behind, as if there were a finish line you were meant to have crossed by now. But this is the measuring cup of your anxiety talking, not the reality of your journey. You are not a product to be finished. You are a landscape that is constantly, beautifully in the process of becoming. When you feel the guilt of resting, the feeling that you have not earned your quiet, remind yourself that rest is not a reward for labor. It is the soil in which the spirit heals. You do not need to prove your utility to the world in order to be allowed to breathe. You may find yourself trying to control the direction of a relationship, shifting your personality, watching your words, and editing your authentic feelings because you are afraid of being misunderstood or left behind. You are working so hard to irrigate that specific terrace, trying to ensure it stays green at any cost. But when you are acting from fear, you are not truly present in the connection. You are present in your performance. The shift here is to care deeply without gripping tightly. You can show up for others with an open heart, offering your honesty and your presence, while simultaneously releasing the need for them to respond in any specific way. That is the true freedom of being a person who is not afraid of the drought. We often smile while we feel heavy inside, walking through our days with a polished exterior, terrified that if we drop the act, the whole structure will collapse. We want to be the ones who have it all together, who handle the storm with grace, who never let the terraces dry out. This is the weight of the iron gate we carry in our pockets. But what happens if you let yourself be human for a moment? What happens if you stop trying to be the master of the rain? When you are tired, let yourself be tired. When you are uncertain, let yourself be uncertain. You do not need to provide a version of yourself that is always blooming. You can be the one who is currently in the cycle of the season that is necessary for your growth, even if that season is quiet, slow, or seemingly empty. The practice of not obeying every thought is the most powerful tool you have. You do not have to believe the voice that says you are not enough. You do not have to follow the instructions of the mind when it tells you to worry about a future that hasn't arrived. When a thought arises that causes you to tighten your fist, treat it as a wind. It has no substance. It cannot knock you over unless you decide to lean into it. Just notice the wind. Acknowledge the direction it is blowing, and keep your focus on the mountain, which remains firm and unmoving. You can act on your life without being the prisoner of your intentions. You can mend the wall, you can clear the silt, and you can tend the channel, all while knowing that the storm might come again tomorrow. You are not building for eternity. You are building for today. You are tending to the reality of the present. This is the discipline of the wise. It is the ability to show up with your full self, to work with care, and to let go of the result as soon as the work is done. There is such profound peace in the small, quiet acts of life. The way you take a breath before you answer a question. The way you choose to set your phone aside when you feel the surge of anxiety. The way you allow yourself to lie in bed and listen to the rain, without feeling the need to interpret what it means for your harvest. These are the moments where you are truly living. These are the moments where the iron gates are left in the dust, and your hands are finally free to receive whatever the mountain brings. You are learning to trust the mountain. You are learning that the water will move, that the seasons will shift, and that you have everything you need to navigate the changes. You are not a small, fragile creature trying to hide from the elements. You are a steady, conscious being, existing within the flow. The feeling of being behind was a misunderstanding of your own timing. You are exactly where the mountain has asked you to be, and there is no other place you need to arrive. Stay with this sense of relief. It is not an escape from your life. It is the only way to truly enter into it. When the world asks you to run, you can walk. When the world asks you to worry, you can breathe. When the world asks you to be more, you can simply be yourself in all your unfinished, tired, and beautiful reality. That is the only victory that lasts. That is the only harvest that truly satisfies the soul. Everything you have been seeking has been waiting for you to stop the struggle, so you could finally see that you were already home. The mountain air has grown still, and the light on the terraces has faded into the soft velvet indigo of the deep night. You are here, and the mountain is here, and the water is doing exactly what it was meant to do, flowing through the channels of the earth, without asking for permission, without needing to be directed, and without caring for the hour. You have spent so much time holding the iron gate of your own vigilance, pushing against the flow, trying to build a dam against the passage of your own life. But the night has come to wash the silt of that worry away. The gate is heavy, and it is covered in the rust of old fears. But you do not need to carry it into your dreams. You have permission to lay it down in the tall, cool grass of the ridge and walk away, leaving the mountain to carry its own weight. Your breathing is becoming slow, drifting in and out with the rhythm of the hidden spring. Feel the heaviness in your limbs, a natural earthy gravity that pulls you toward the stillness of the stone terraces. There is no need to move. There is no need to adjust the position of your body. You are held by the same ground that holds the pines and the ancient rock faces. Let your bones be heavy. Let the muscles in your face soften, releasing the lines of calculation and the furrow of the furrowed brow. You are not a laborer tonight. You are not the keeper of the channels. You are the space that remains when all the labor has been set aside. The terraces are reflecting the vast dark sky, and within those pools the stars are mirrored in silent liquid light. Your mind, once a turbulent channel, is becoming like that water. The sediment of your thoughts is sinking, settling gently to the bottom, leaving the surface clear and undisturbed. You do not need to clear the water yourself. You only need to stop stirring it. You only need to let the stillness come to you, like a guest who has been waiting in the shadows all along. If a thought drifts by, let it be like a leaf floating on the surface of the pool. Do not reach for it. Do not define it. Watch it pass, and let it drift toward the edge, where it will eventually become part of the earth again. You have done enough today. The work that was unfinished will be there when the sun returns. But the sun is far away now, and the mountain belongs to the moon. You are not being asked to solve the drought tonight. You are not being asked to fix the broken walls or to predict the next season. You are being asked only to be here, to be present, to be the witness to the silence. Feel the warmth of your own chest, the quiet rise and fall of the air entering and leaving your body. This is the only work that is required of you, and it is a work of total, beautiful surrender. The rusted gate is far behind you on the ridge, an abandoned thing that no longer has any claim on your hands. The measuring cup has been set down in the dust, and you no longer need to know how much you have or how little you lack. You are not behind. You are not waiting for a signal. You are not in a race against the light. You are simply a part of the mountain, resting in the cool, saturated dark, letting the rhythm of the earth move through your veins. There is a deep, ancient wisdom in your own body that knows how to drift into this quiet, and it is taking the lead now, guiding you into the deepest, softest part of yourself. Everything that felt sharp earlier in the day is softening now. The edges of your worries are blurring, turning into smoke, then into air. You are dissolving into the comfort of the night, becoming one with the silence of the terraces, where the water flows in the dark, and the stone holds the warmth of the day, and the sky opens wide to embrace the peak. You are not leaving your life behind. You are simply finding the part of it that does not need to be managed. You are returning to the truth that was there before the struggle began, and will be there after the struggle is gone. There is nothing you need to guard here. There is no wall you must defend. There is no crop you must save from the storm. You are the mountain, you are the water, and you are the vast, quiet space that holds them both. Breathe into that space. Let the last remnants of your effort slip away like mist falling off the cliffs. You are safe. You are held. You are finally, completely at home in the quiet. And if the peace you have been searching for was never something to be earned, but the quiet emptiness that remained once you finally let go of the gate, what else might you be free to become?